Now we're going to take a look at what we call the structure classes. Well, if you think about it, if 99% of the words in our vocabulary are form classes, that means that only 1% are what we call the structure classes. These are also called the closed classes. And the reason we call them that is because, as almost like a country club, membership's kind of closed. We don't really create new prepositions or new conjunctions. And so, unlike the other form classes where we're constantly creating neologisms and new words, these ones are pretty set in stone. So the reason we call them structure classes are these are the small, limited groups of words that fill in the structural gaps between the form classes. If you think about the form classes, these big clunky blocks which basically create sentences for us, they seem very choppy, the sentence would be, unless we filled in the gaps with these individual tiny little structure classes to kind of show relationship between them. So they're minor, but they're really important. So the first one you may not have ever heard of before is what we call a determiner. So articles, a, and the, our articles are now referred to as a bigger category called determiners. Possessive nouns, like Mr. Burns would be a possessive noun and he would be considered a determiner. A determiner basically determines there's a noun showing up. So the articles always let me know there's a noun showing up. Something which is possessive, like Mr. Burns, is letting me know that there's going to be a noun showing up. In this case, mustache. There he is. Or bacon's aroma. Bacon's is the determiner. Bacon by itself is a noun. Bacon's becomes the determiner. Possessive pronouns are also determiners. Their cornhole addiction. His mesmerizing unibrow. So a possessive pronoun would let me know that there's a noun showing up. And also demonstrative pronouns. This, that, these, and those are all now categorized as determiners. And lastly, our indefinite pronouns. Examples like some lousy advice, several, jelly donuts. And so these are all called determiners. They're not really adjectives, they're something different. So we call them determiners. The next structure class is what we call our qualifiers. Qualifiers basically alter or intensify the meaning of an adjective or an adverb. So you could be excited, but you could be really excited. You could be awake, but you're wide awake. And we can see this long list of examples here, like very thirsty, fairly certain, awfully bored, every Sunday, even better, too quickly, rather dull, quite tired, much later. And so what I would normally would call these adverbs probably growing up in school, I realize they're not really adverbs. They don't do what adverbs do. And so therefore these are called qualifiers. They qualify or they intensify or they alter the meaning of an adjective or an adverb. Next are our prepositions. You've heard of prepositions, and prepositions can either be singular or they can be phrasal, meaning they come in little groupings. And when I take a preposition and I partner it with a noun, I create what we call a prepositional phrase. So I could say the child with the brain deficiency is playing with the blender. And those are both prepositional phrases. Prep phrases can work as adjectives, and they can also work as adverbs. With the brain deficiency is an adjective describing the child, with the blender is an adverb modifying is playing. Because of our annoying neighbors, we went inside for the evening. And so we talked about how we can have singular prepositions like with, for. We can also have phrasal prepositions like because of is all treated as one large preposition. Prepositions alone, though, when they're all by themselves, they're actually adverbs. Let me show you what I mean. If I said, because of our annoying neighbors, we went inside for the evening. Well, for the evening is the prepositional phrase. But inside's a preposition, but he doesn't have a noun with him. So when he's by himself, we call him an adverb. However, if I said, because of our annoying neighbors, we went inside the house for the evening, now it turns into a preposition. It's only a preposition when it's coupled with a noun. Next, we have particles. So to kind of make this even more confusing, a preposition then when it partners with a verb is called a particle. So when we take a verb and we add a preposition to it, we call that a phrasal verb. And that preposition is now officially called a particle. So if I take the word look up, well, look up could be just an adverb. And so the word up could be an adverb, like looking where? Where are you looking? I'm looking up. And that's where up is just simply working as an adverb. But if I want to say look up as one big verb, as a phrasal verb, Maybe I mean research, like look up online, research online. So sometimes the particle up is going to partner up with that verb and create a phrasal verb. So that preposition turns into a particle, and now it becomes a phrasal verb. And then sometimes that preposition's just kind of hanging out by himself, and he's just a plain old adverb. So it's interesting that our list of prepositions can be prepositions when they're with nouns. They can be adverbs when they're by themselves, and they can also turn into particles if they're with the right verb. So if I said we were told not to look up at the solar eclipse, that is an adverb. To look where? Up. If I said they were told not to look up answers online during the at home test, that's a particle because look up is one big verb. So if we simply swap out the phrasal verb with a singular verb, that's usually a pretty good test. So if I said something like, as a fellow Steelers fan, I don't know how she puts up with Ryan's passion for the Ravens. Well, how do I know that puts up with is a big verb, or how do I know puts is the verb and up and with are just adverbs? So I try to swap it out and think, well, could I put in a single word? Maybe. I could say, as a fellow Steelers fan, I don't know how she tolerates. Puts up with is just like saying tolerates, it's a phrasal verb. So therefore, up and with are particles to create the phrasal verb puts up with. Next are what we call the auxiliaries. If you want to, you can call them helping verbs. Auxiliaries are these words which attach to the front of the verb. And there's a huge list there, forms of both singular and plural, as well as present and past tense. Has, have, had, can, could, does. It says does. Why does it say does? Does, did. There's an error there somewhere. Will, would, shall, should, may, might, must. Ought to is just hideous, but it is one of them. Ought to. Here's am, there's is, there's are, be, was, were, been, being. All those are helping verbs. I've got to figure out why do I have does, but that's my problem, not yours. All right. And we use auxiliaries to identify sometimes what we call the complete verb, not a verb phrase, but a complete verb. So let me show you what I mean. If I said Carmichael has been napping during grammar class, well, napping is the verb, but has and been are actually the auxiliaries. They're the helpers as part of that verb. If I said Grandpa will not put up with any criticism of his conservative news station, well, put is the verb. The particles up and with create a phrasal verb, and the auxiliary will is sitting in front of it. So will put up with is the whole complete verb. You notice I didn't touch the word not. Not's not on our list of auxiliaries. Not's not a helping verb. And so it's not part of that verb at all. Next are our conjunctions. And conjunctions can join two or more words, phrases, or clauses. And there are actually three different types: coordinating, correlative, and subordinating. But we're only going to focus on the first two for right now. It's going to take us a while before we get to the subordinating conjunctions. Coordinating conjunctions always come in singles, and there's 7 of them. Some people memorize them as being the fanboys. I didn't memorize them that way, so I have them in a weird order of and, but, or, nor, for, so, and yet. But if you want to memorize them as the fanboys, more power to you. The correlative conjunctions come in pairs, so where there's one, there's the other, and there's 4 of those: neither, nor, either, or, both, and, not only, but also. Next are what we call expletives. I'm going to introduce expletives, but we're not going to get to them for a little bit. So an expletive is basically an empty word that has no meaning, but it makes other structures possible. So it's important, but it doesn't have any meaning in itself. And the expletive could be stated, but it actually can be like imaginary or understood, which really makes it kind of weird. So here are the understood ones, like I think I know what your problem is today. But there's kind of a missing word that. Or his students considered Mr. Fisher a talented beatboxer. Well, to be's kind of been understood in this one. Mr. Marsh, our resident grammar god, wooed us with his passion for grammar. But the word or has been sort of cut out. The players and coaches have voted Rick captain of the football team, and the word as has been sort of cut out. So those are some examples of understood expletives. Then there are the stated expletives. Sometimes they actually literally are in the sentence, like, there is applesauce in my pockets. We're going to find there as an expletive. Here are the boxes of rubber gloves you ordered from Amazon. here is going to be an expletive. I wonder if inviting that hippie into my home was a mistake. If's going to be an expletive. We were betting on whether or not Mr. Doherty would remember to give us a quiz today. And whether or not, that's an expletive. So it may not necessarily make a lot of sense to you right now, but just know that we're going to come across expletives as one of our structure classes. Lastly are the interrogatives. And we use these words to introduce questions. So, what am I expected to do with all this lunch meat? What is an interrogative? I wondered why Mr. Fisher was snacking on a stick of butter during class. I want you to notice that sometimes the interrogative will start a sentence, and sometimes it might be in the middle of a sentence. It's okay. Even though that second one is not really a question, it's still introducing a question within that sentence. So here's a huge list of what we call the interrogatives. Sometimes they have little buddies with them, like who and whoever, whom and whomever, what and whatever, where and wherever, which and whichever, whose and whose ever. Then you got these three knuckleheads at the very end: when, how, and why. But those are interrogatives. These are our structure classes. And so it's really important for us to start using the terminology. It might take us some time, but using this is going to help us eventually form what we call the 10 sentence patterns as we get into sentence diagramming next.